glad you could join us on this lovely Saturday. I'm Luckman N. I will be hosting this webinar, and our speaker will be the lovely Miss Calla B, Calla B. We'll be talking today about how to create an ideal early application school list and strategies for EA and ED applications. So a little about us. Harmonyplus is an international learning ecosystem based in the Silicon Valley, right here in Silicon Valley where I am right now, that seeks to upgrade education. We seek to do this through a hybrid learning model, leveraging both in-person and online resources. Harmonyplus equips students with the skills they need to not only adapt, but excel in highly competitive educational and professional climates. Our hybrid, learning platform, education and service, both online and offline, synchronous and asynchronous. We practice both theory and practice for those of you that are more pragmatic. And, you know, we're equipped with guidance from top teachers, endorsements from some of the leading brand name universities. We help students build the competitive advantage that they need and enjoy continuous improvement with our finely honed programs. Universities where Harmonyplus students have been admitted, some of the best in the nation: Johns Hopkins, UC Berkeley, a very big one, Yale University, we've all heard of Yale, Stanford, where Ms. Butka actually attended, the University of Chicago, Cornell, University of Illinois, Columbia, a lot of Ivy League names you're seeing, Princeton, Emory, Washington University, NYU, University of Michigan, the prestigious University of Southern California, UCLA, Carnegie Mellon. Those are just a few of the big names. And more about Ms. Calla B. She is our Chief of Staff at Harmonyplus, also our Senior Education Consultant, amongst many other hats she wears. She is our Future Leader Academy and EATIC Program Manager for all the extracurriculars, getting students plugged in where they need to get that resume up to not only excel later professionally, but get into those big name colleges we had listed. She has helped hundreds of students before Harmonyplus. She's been doing this for a very long time and has a very proven track record of helping students gain admissions to the university of their dreams. Master of Arts in East Asian Studies from the prestigious Stanford University right here in Palo Alto, and was actually a full scholarship recipient, which leads you to believe she did that herself. She can show your child how to do that. So that's a good return on investment right there. And a Bachelor of Arts in German, Chinese, and East Asian Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, preceding her Master of Arts at Stanford University. And with that, I think Calla is ready to introduce us. Take it away and tell us your agenda for the evening.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Luckman. So today we're going to be talking a lot about how to create an ideal school list, and then talk about the strategies for applying EA and ED. So first, we'll just go over the college application situation from this last season. It was a little bit different, of course, because of COVID, and some of the policies are still lingering. So I'll just share some information about that. Then we'll talk about just some general advice for creating a school list, go a little bit over the timeline for college admissions, then some very specific strategies for when you should apply EA or ED. And then at the end, we'll let you know how Harmonyplus can help you. Okay, so the overall college application situation from last season. So just a few statistics. I know a lot of people here like to see those numbers. So last year, applications to top tier colleges surged. So why did that happen? Well, that was basically because almost all schools made the SAT optional. They had some sort of test optional policy. Some schools like the UCs even went test blind. So for a lot of those top tier colleges, a lot more applicants were applying because then they didn't need to worry about submitting those standardized test scores. And as a result, applications really surged. However, on the other hand, applications to lesser known schools sharply declined. So some percentages, on the Common App overall, there were 10% more applications submitted by 1% more students. So basically students were simply applying to more schools. Harvard saw a huge jump, 42% increase in applications. And then going to a top public school, UCLA, there were double-digit surges in applications as well. However, community college enrollment dropped by 20% during COVID. So interesting numbers. So most of this was, of course, because of the radical college admissions changes in the last season. So as I mentioned before, many schools became test optional, and schools like the UCs even became test blind. Also, many schools discontinued their SAT subject test requirements, and actually now the SAT subject tests have been totally discontinued by a college board in favor of students mostly just focusing on their AP exams now. And the SAT writing section was also discontinued. So really, really big changes. And these are here to stay actually, especially this last bullet point. So here is the forecast. Okay, so for the past application season, 2/3 of colleges were test optional or test blind, so a good portion. So for fall 2022, actually, a lot of colleges have already committed to being test optional or test blind. So these policies are here to stay. The majority of schools, of course, are test optional, but they just want to be more inclusive and give more opportunities to students. Because of course, we're still feeling the effects of the pandemic, even as more and more people get vaccinated and as things open up. And the UCs, I'm sure many of you have heard the news, but just a reminder. So the UC system will be test blind until 2024. And the UC system is actually planning on creating a new assessment for 2025 onwards. Okay, so not as much emphasis on those tests. So just giving you guys some context as you craft your ideal school list, because things will be a little bit different now that there are these new policies, and especially considering the fact that they're here to stay. Okay, so now talking about school lists. So just some general advice. So step 1, determine your priorities. So there are many different factors to consider. One factor would be ranking. Okay, so you can think of the overall ranking. Maybe you love looking at that US News list. A lot of people like that. Some other people like to maybe look at the QS rankings or other world rankings as well. So sometimes that overall ranking matters more. For others, they really care about the ranking of the major. So you kind of want to think about that. First of all, is ranking important? And then the second step, if it is the overall ranking or the major ranking important? You also need to consider the type of school you want to go to. Do you want to go to a public school, private, or a liberal arts college? And I'll provide a little more information about these in just a moment. Another consideration is location. Maybe the weather is a factor there as well. So I know we have a lot of students in the Bay Area in California. So a lot of my students are just like, I just really want to stay in California. Like I love the UCs, and if not a UC, maybe one of the private schools in California. I just love it here. I'm from here. The weather is great. And then conversely, some students are like, oh, the weather in that place is so bad. I definitely don't want to go there. For instance, a lot of the California students can't handle that Wisconsin cold. That's where I'm from and where I went to undergrad. I personally don't think it's that bad, but you got to know yourself. If that's big consideration, then so be it. College size and class size. So some students would rather have that smaller environment, especially one that like liberal arts college can offer, because those tend to just have a few hundred or a few thousand students. Whereas some students like to have that really big university feel, a little more anonymity, we can say, or just many more offerings that come with being at a really large university. And related to that is class size. So usually when the college size is a lot bigger, class sizes will also go up as well. However, a caveat here is even at those large universities, yeah, you might have a lecture with 500 other students. However, the class size for some of the discussion sections, maybe with the TA or even in upper level courses with a professor, might still have 15 or 20 students. So, it isn't always the case that big university only has those large class sizes. But of course, on the other hand, those smaller universities will mostly just have those smaller class sizes. So if that's a really big deal to you, you really want to have those small class sizes, then probably private or especially the local arts colleges would be a good fit. Okay, the next one is specialized programs. So some colleges have very special majors. Actually, recently I've been talking to a lot of my students about college selection, and CMU has been a top choice for a lot of students because they just have some really unique bachelor's degree programs. One of them would be like human computer interaction, for instance. And they also have a bachelor's degree specifically in artificial intelligence. So if you're really interested in some of those super specialized majors, or some other specialized programs might be like a dual degree program that you could do, or a special study abroad program that's kind of tied with your degree, or even like an accelerated program that you could apply for that would allow you to maybe do undergrad and then like an MD in 7 years. Some colleges have that as well. So that can be a huge attraction point for many students. Extracurricular activities. Usually this isn't the top factor for a lot of students, but it's definitely a nice consideration. Maybe students were really involved in like choir or orchestra or band when they were in high school, and they just want to continue that in college and have that kind of opportunity. That's a nice consideration. Or maybe sports, so maybe being able to participate in a club sport if students were really involved in a sport in high school. So those are good things to consider as well. Another really big factor for many students are internship and job opportunities, as well as the ability to connect with really high-powered alumni. So the thing is, for quite a few schools, maybe some of the schools like in the Bay Area, for instance, aren't as highly ranked as like Stanford or Berkeley, but San Jose State, Santa Clara University, some of these universities in the Bay Area that don't have those super high rankings, a lot of students still like to go there because there are just so many really great internship and job opportunities. I've had students attend these universities in the past. I also have quite a few friends who attended both of these universities, and almost all of them, a huge percentage of friends who went to these universities have really good jobs, like Google, Facebook, Amazon, just because they were in the right location. So it's definitely important to think about location in the university in terms of, can you get those good internship and job opportunities? So proximity to really where things are happening. Another key factor is the campus environment, diversity, student culture. So different schools definitely have different feels, right? So for instance, the University of Chicago is known for being kind of a quirky school. I think they like to say where fun comes to die. So it's very academically inclined. Whereas some other schools, maybe like where my colleague Luckman here went, UCSB, has a little bit of a reputation of being a party school. So, and so did my undergrad, actually, the University of Wisconsin. Of course, it wasn't like every single student was partying, but that's definitely something to be aware of, because a good portion of the student body is doing that. So, if that's something that's very important, definitely keep that in mind. And then last but not least here, study abroad opportunities. So some universities have really great study abroad programs. So Boston University, NYU, University of Wisconsin, for instance, they really have a lot of specialized study abroad opportunities to locations maybe you hadn't even heard of before. So if you're really inclined to study abroad or learn different languages, definitely an important thing to consider. Okay, so now a little bit more in depth about some of these terms. So public versus private. So what are some of the big differences here? Well, for one, college size and class size. So usually those private universities will be a little smaller in terms of overall size as well as class size. The private school tuition will usually be a bit more. Okay, so we have, for example, here of UC Berkeley and USC. So I don't know, it's a little bit small, but if you can see the tuition at USC is a lot more compared to Berkeley, especially compared to that in-state tuition. Okay, then public school tuition. So if you're in-state, great. So the tuition will probably be quite reasonable compared to other schools. However, that out-of-state tuition at public universities might be a bit less than private universities, but it still can be much higher than that in-state tuition. So based on our statistics right here, so tuition for Berkeley for out-of-state students is about $43K when we put this together, whereas it was about $14K for in-state students. And then USC, $56K, so more than either one of those types of tuition for Berkeley. And then another consideration would be financial aid and scholarships. So generally speaking, a lot of those high-powered private universities will award many more scholarship dollars. However, always do the math and always get to that total amount that you would actually end up paying, because many private universities might give a very generous scholarship, but then their tuition might be so much higher that you're still paying quite a bit more out of pocket than you would if you just went to your in-state flagship university. So keep all of these things in mind when you're looking at the public and private debate. Then we have regional universities. So according to the US News, schools are placed in 4 different regions. So we have the West, the Midwest, the North, and the South. So some of the top ranked schools in the different regions are also definitely worth considering. So in the US News, certain schools are considered regional, primarily because it's usually just students from that region attending that university. So schools become national universities when there are students from all over the place attending. Then we have liberal arts colleges, or LAC for short. Okay, so some of the top tier liberal arts colleges that are very competitive to get into. Very competitive. Williams is usually ranked #1 most years. We also have Amherst, Swarthmore, Wellesley, and Pomona in that top tier. Okay, so some of these have very, very low acceptance rates, just like the Ivy League schools. Okay, then some other highly selective liberal arts colleges, Grinnell, Reed, Colorado College, Macalester, Oberlin, Franklin and Marshall, Bucknell, Hamilton, Union, Kenyon, and Occidental. And there's some other good ones like Lewis and Clark, Earlham, Gonzaga, Whitman, and Loyola Marymount. So how are these different than private schools? Well, usually liberal arts colleges tend to be even smaller. They really focus on getting a comprehensive education. So, even if your major is physics, you'll still be taking a bunch of writing courses. Okay, so it's really all about that liberal arts education, which means getting a really comprehensive education. And at these colleges, students aren't really learning such specialized things. Like for instance, if you go to we'll just use the University of Wisconsin as an example, since I went there for undergrad. So undergrad students can even go right to the business school and get a bachelor's of business administration, or they can go right to the School of Engineering and get an engineering degree. Liberal arts colleges don't have these professional degrees usually. So usually there's just kind of that one college, and then you choose your major within that. Some other key characteristics are because they're smaller, usually class sizes are much smaller at these schools as well. And there's a lot more interaction with professors. So quite a few liberal arts colleges are just really focusing a lot more on undergrad research or undergrad teaching. So professors at these really large universities have many other things to do. They really need to focus on research first and foremost, especially if they want to get those tenure positions. They need to work with grad students for getting their PhDs and do a bit of undergrad teaching on the side. For liberal arts colleges, it's kind of flipped. So the professors are really focused on that undergrad teaching and really giving those undergrads that attention that they would like. So just very different, really depends on your personal preferences. Okay, so that's all about, choosing what kind of priorities you have in terms of colleges. And actually, when I work with students, I have a college preferences questionnaire that I have all students fill out, and we cover all sorts of those areas. So then students can really think what their preferences are and what are some of those must-have things for their school lists. Okay, and then step 2. So then you just need to do some research. Okay, of course, it's good to go to each school's website, but that might be a little overwhelming, and you might not know tons of schools at this point. So here are some really good websites to start with. So a lot of people like to start with the US News ranking. That's definitely the most famous ranking out there for US universities. College Express has lots of good information, as does Unigo. Then there's also Niche. Niche is one of my favorite websites as well, in addition to the US News. There's a lot of good information on there. And something else that I like about Niche is students who go to the university can also make a bunch of comments and kind of give like reviews of the school. So then you can get a lot of firsthand accounts about what it's actually like there. And then the College Board. So College Board is where you sign up for like the AP and SAT exam, but they also have their big future section. So you can also go on there and learn more about colleges there as well. So these are all great online resources. Okay, so then we have step 3, find your fit. So you should rank your priorities and assess their level of importance to you. Then consider each school's admissions requirements. So basically here, if Harvard is your dream school, but then you look at those admissions requirements, maybe you didn't take the SAT or you don't have a very, very high score, probably want to apply to some of those other schools, right? Then assess your candidacy with that as well. So compare your own academic, standardized test, and extracurricular profile with the averages for each school. So like I said before, if your standardized test score is much lower than the average, or even if it's below that middle 50, probably don't want to apply to that school. Or maybe you can apply, but just know that it's highly unlikely that you get in unless you have like a really amazing extracurricular background or a really, really compelling essay. But normally it's going to be pretty tough. So, just kind of have a reality check, right? So really compare your own credentials. And then another tool to use is Naviance, or some other schools these days are using similar software, like Score, for instance, or Cialfo. So Naviance, Score, Cialfo, they all are these like student portals where you can work with your high school counselor to get some school recommendations and also look into some different options. And the great thing about these sorts of websites is that you can have access to your high school's admissions history. So you can see the data. So for instance, maybe you find out that your high school is a total feeder school into a certain Ivy League school. Well, that's great. Then maybe you want to apply to that Ivy League school if you're kind of deciding between a few. And then maybe you can also see the admissions history specifically with what scores those students had or what GPA those students from your school had. So not just the number of students who got into that school, but like what their backgrounds were. So then you can make some predictions based on yourself. So this data is usually going to be the most accurate for you because this is like exactly your context from your high school. Okay, so let's be honest, there are certain private high schools that are kind of feeders into some of the Ivy League schools because there are just tons of students from that school going to some of those top universities. So definitely just be aware of that. Okay, then step 4. So get organized. I usually recommend creating an Excel spreadsheet. That's just a great way to keep track of all of your schools and the data. And then it's good to categorize your schools. So I usually use the words reach, target, and safety. So some other college consultants might say like reach, target, likely, or they might use like the word dream. I usually use these 3 words. Sometimes I even use the word dream to go beyond reach. Because, like, for instance, Harvard and Stanford are a different kind of reach than like NYU might be for you. NYU might be kind of a reach, but like more realistic than like Harvard, for instance. So sometimes I use the word dream in there as well. Okay, so this is the general categorization that I normally use and many other college consultants would use as well. So reach will usually be less than 25% chance of acceptance. Target will be between a 25 and 75% chance. So that's usually going to be your core range. And safety will usually be greater than 75% chance of acceptance. Okay, so some examples of spreadsheets that I've used with students. Of course, this isn't the whole list, but I didn't want to make it so small by including all the schools. So I just, picked a few schools from the list so then I could kind of show you guys how I organized it. So like university name, location, then it's good to have the rankings here, acceptance rate, average GPA and ACT or SAT score, then the categorization, so is it reach target or safety, then some information about the application deadlines. So for instance, for this student, we wrote RD and ED2 here because we're not exactly sure what he'd want to do for Boston College. But then we kind of decided for some of these other schools, like, oh, Northeastern will for sure do early action because Northeastern doesn't have any supplemental essays. So why not just apply early? Just good to hear back earlier. And then, yeah, just kind of making a plan for some of these other schools. And it's also good to keep the major in mind as well. So, spreadsheets, maybe some people think it's a little old fashioned, but I think it's just the tried and true way to have all of the information that you need in one place. So then you can look at it all together and have that bird's eye view of your school list. Okay, and then transfer students. So this one's a little bit different. So sometimes for transfer, you oftentimes don't need like an SAT or ACT score. In this student's case, this student just didn't take that, so that was not a consideration. This student was also from China, so TOEFL was a requirement for certain transfer programs. So that was definitely a big thing that we had to keep in mind there. So here, once again, just looking at like the ranking, then the transfer deadlines. Sometimes you can do transfer for spring as well, so another consideration, major. And then it's always nice to have some hyperlinks. So when I make school lists for students, I always like to add the hyperlinks. For instance, for the TOEFL policies, because they were a bit complicated in this situation. So just wanted to always be able to go back and see that info. And it's nice to click on the hyperlinks for like the school website, and then also for the transfer admission rates. So some of these were from like slightly unofficial sources. So sometimes it's hard to get data for like transfer or certain graduate school program acceptance rates. So, it's always like take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. And then I also like to cite my sources. Okay, and then grad school. So kind of similar to like the transfer one, but here also focusing on the average GRE score and GPA for undergrad, because those are important statistics as well. Then for grad school, it's also good to consider the application deadline. So they don't really have early action or early decision for grad school, but they have something similar, like different rounds. So then you should have a strategy for that as well. And for grad school, we almost always do the program ranking instead of the university ranking. So this one here was for computational finance. And I also wrote the different titles of each program because at some schools it's called computational finance, others financial engineering or some sort of variation of that. So for grad school, this is something good to consider. Okay, so then we have step 5. So narrow down your final school list. So normally for undergrad students, we'll do reach 3 to 4 schools, target 5 to 6 schools, and safety 3 to 4 schools. So overall, for undergraduate applications, I usually encourage applying to 10 to 12 schools. And in that 10 to 12, I usually consider the UC application to be one application. So even if you're applying to like 6 of the UC schools, just count that as one application because it's only the work of one application. The reason we quantify how many schools you should apply to is if you apply to 30 schools, which students have done in the past, it is just really overwhelming. Applications are a lot of work. Of course, you can get a lot of good help from your consultant, but as a student, you still need to do a lot of work. The essays still need to be yours, filling out those forms, all those supplemental essays. It is quite a lot. So usually 10 to 12 schools will be reasonable. Then for transfer and grad programs, the strategy might be a little different in some situations. I still usually like to do a mixture of reach, target, and safety if students have to transfer because they were just going to like a 2-year community college, or if students, are only like, well, I only want to go to grad school if I can get into a really top university. Then in that kind of situation, we might just have the student apply to like the really top ones, and then if they don't get in, then so be it, because grad school is kind of an optional thing these days. But in the community college case, if a student has to transfer, we would still kind of follow this plan. But if a student is like, well, I'm currently at a four-year university now, I just want to have a try to see if I can get into an even better university, then we still might have a slightly more aggressive strategy if they aren't like 100% like they have to transfer. So yeah, this is kind of just the general advice for undergrad at this point. Okay, and then a little more advice for creating your ideal school list. So definitely do some research yourself and schools on the front end of creating your preliminary school list. So always good to look at the data, understand what the schools are all about, really important step. Don't make a list that includes only highly selective colleges, a good combination of reach, target, and safety. Also keep in mind that applying to 10 of the most highly selective schools definitely does not multiply your chances of being admitted by 10. Might help a little bit, but definitely it's not in that kind of ratio. Then each college on your list should definitely be a first choice. So what we mean by that is you should actually want to go to all of the schools you're applying to. Even for some of your safety schools, like you still need to have in your mind, like worst case scenario, if I had to go to this school, would I be fine with it? And you need to have your answer be yes for that. So that's how you can decide even your safety schools. Balance your list among schools according to their difficulty of admission and cost as well, so consider that. And then always keep in mind, the goal is for you to have options and a happy outcome in the spring of your senior year. Okay, so now we'll kind of switch gears a little bit to talking about that early application strategy. So first we need to take a look at the college application timeline. So this past spring, a lot of students were just taking their APs, thinking about their college list, doing some essays. This summer, students are working on those college essays and also probably taking the SAT or ACT. Early fall, so those early applications will be due. November 1st is the big date. So if you're going to remember any date from today, November 1st for early action and early decision. Then you'll be working on a bunch of college essays then. Late fall, the UCs, UW, and other big state schools will be due. So the UCs are due on November 30th. University of Washington's another big one that's due on November 15th, and more college essays. And then many of the regular deadlines for like private and public colleges will be due between December 31st and February 1st. And the dates vary quite a bit within that range. Okay, so now we know when these early applications are happening. So let's talk about some strategies. So there are a few types of early applications. So let's talk about these. EA stands for early action. Early action is non-binding. That means that it is okay to apply to other schools because you do not have to go to that school if you get in. You're simply applying early. So these early action schools tend not to be top tier, although there are a few top schools that do have early action. Then there's restrictive early action. So this is also non-binding. However, caveat here is that you can only apply to one school during the early application round. So this is usually for those super selective schools like Harvard, Stanford, and Yale. And then there's early decision. So contrary to the other two, early decision is binding. So binding means that if you get in, you have to go there. So considering that logic, you only may apply to one school in this ED round. So this includes like Brown, Penn, Duke, Columbia, and many liberal arts colleges. They have this early decision option. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of applying early? Well, as we'll see on the next slide, the acceptance rate for ED and also for EA and REA at many schools is higher than the RD acceptance rate. And for REA and ED, you're demonstrating to the school that you apply to that it is your first choice because you can only choose one school, REA or ED. And then the third benefit is peace of mind. Your applications are done sooner, and then you'll hear back sooner. And then, if you get into your ED school or the EA or REA school that you really like and you accept the offer, you can probably do that in December and then have a nice Christmas and New Year's. So quite a few benefits to applying early. Okay, so then here are some numbers. So we have quite a few selective schools here, as you can see. So here are the early acceptance rates compared to the overall acceptance rates. Okay, so as you can see here, in most cases, it is quite advantageous to apply early in this like early decision or restricted early action round. Some of these schools are quite a bit higher actually, right? Like let's look at like Penn, for instance. Okay, you go into double digits for acceptance instead of single digits, as is the case with like Yale and Harvard as well. MIT, not a huge difference, unfortunately, but MIT is kind of the exception to the rule here. Okay, then some typical application deadlines and when you receive your admissions decisions. So these are just very general. I have specific dates on the coming slides. So early action is usually going to be due in November, and then you'll get a decision in December. Early decision, same situation. Apply in November, hear back in December. This is contrary to regular decision, which is usually going to be due in January or February, and then you'll hear back in March or even April. So definitely nice to apply early so you can hear a few months earlier, have that peace of mind. Then there's another type called rolling admission. So rolling admission doesn't have such a specific deadline. Once in a while, there'll be like a very like far off deadline. It might even say like June or July, like a month or two before school actually starts. But normally with rolling admission, you'll still want to apply early because it's like the earlier you apply, the earlier you hear back. So it's just nice to have that peace of mind. Okay, now some specific schools and when their deadlines are. So colleges with ED1 deadlines on November 1st. So this is a big one. So for instance, we have Boston College, Boston University, CMU, Columbia, Dartmouth, Duke, Emory, Johns Hopkins, NYU, Northeastern, and then quite a few other top schools. Okay, then some colleges with other ED1 deadlines other than that November 1st one. So we have Cornell due on November 16th, and Williams College, that top liberal arts college, is also due on November 16th for their ED1. So nice to have a little more time for that. Then colleges with an ED2 application round. So this was not common at all a few years ago, but then more and more schools are doing that. So ED2, what is this? Well, this is basically a little bit later than ED1. So as you can see, for instance, Boston College, their ED1 is due on November 1st, and then their ED2 is due on January 1st. But it's still called early decision because you still will hear back earlier than the regular decision round, number one. And number two, this is binding. So if you do ED2, you can only apply to one school ED2, and if you get in, you have to go there. So colleges also like to do this because then they're guaranteed that those students will go there. And students who just need a little extra time to do their applications, this is still nice to do ED2 because then you're showing the school that this is your top choice and that you really want to go there. So a lot of schools have ED2, as you can see. And actually, yeah, all of these schools also have ED1, of course. So deadlines for this varies a little bit, but basically that first week of January is when these deadlines are going to happen. Then colleges with EA deadlines on November 1st. So quite a few. Especially common are the big public universities. Okay, so like Wisconsin, UIUC, Michigan as well. I see my columns slightly got messed up here. Michigan was also on this list. Yeah, like Penn State is another big one. But then also some private schools too. Okay, so we have like Northeastern, for instance. And then, yeah, we have Pepperdine, which is a private one. University of Chicago has an early action, and MIT. So those are kind of like the really tippy top 10 schools that have early action on November 1st. And then Georgia Tech, they have a very early application round. So this is actually their early action too. because their early action 1 is due in October, on October 18th. And then a few other schools that have different EA deadlines. So Ohio State's a little bit later on November 15th, but that's still early action for them. And then Rensselaer, so they're a little bit later as well, but you can still hear back early. Then some colleges with restricted early action. Okay, so remember, this means that you don't have to go if you get in, it's non-binding, but you can only apply to one school early then. So this, yeah, basically just some really top schools, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Yale, and Notre Dame also does this. And most of them are due on November 1st, but Yale does their REA deadline on November 10th. Now, who should apply early? Well, basically students that have a competitive GPA, high standardized test scores, a robust resume, and polished essays by the deadline. So if this isn't the case, then waiting until the EAED2 or regular decision round would likely yield better results for you. So essentially, if you have a good GPA, high test scores by the time November 1st rolls around, or kind of like in late summer, it's definitely worth to apply early, as you can see from those statistics. Okay, but it's also good to start early on essays because November 1st is going to come much sooner than you think. Then some strategies for applying ED. Okay, so why choose ED compared to like REA? So if you really, really want to go to school and it's your number one absolute choice, then apply ED. But just really keep in mind that you must attend the school no matter what. Okay, so make sure that it is your number one absolute choice. Another thing, ensure that you can cover the cost of tuition, regardless of what financial aid package the university offers you. So cost can be another thing to consider. Okay, then some strategies for applying EA. So apply to as many EA schools as you'd like. However, don't overwhelm yourself with too many early applications. Okay, because you need to do a lot of work to write all these supplemental essays. So if schools don't have supplemental essays, for instance, in the past, Ohio State and Northeastern haven't had supplemental essays, they just have like the main Common App essay. Definitely just apply to those schools early. There's basically no reason not to if you have a good GPA and test scores. For the other schools, have a balance, like apply to some schools early, like the schools you really like, but other schools, if it's just kind of so-so, maybe just wait until a regular decision. So you're not applying to like all of your schools early, because that might be overwhelming to do all at once. Yeah, so just kind of prioritize these schools and determine how many high quality essays you can realistically finish by that EA deadline. Then applying REA. So of course, make sure that this school is your top choice, because this is taking the opportunity away to do ED at another school or apply early to other schools. So make sure that you assess your candidacy for the school and really make sure that there is a chance for you to be admitted by that school, because this is for those really top schools. Otherwise, you're just kind of throwing a good opportunity away if it's just going to be basically impossible for you to get into this school. So if you still really like that school and you want to apply, just wait until the regular decision rounds. Then you aren't throwing away another good opportunity at another school. Okay, so that was a lot about crafting a school list and those early applications. So now how can Harmonyplus help you with your college applications? Well, we have our future planning services, Moonshot Education. So the reason why we call it Moonshot Education is because we want to help you reach for the stars. We want to help you get to that next level, shoot for those really top schools. So how specifically can we help? Well, we help with GPA and academic performance, especially for those younger students who sign up in like 8th or 9th grade. So we can provide a lot of support in that area with advising. We can help with exam prep and planning. We have tons of programs that can boost your extracurricular activity profile, give you research experience and also leadership experience. College essays, so during that application season, we have a very intensive process for that. Recommendations, okay, so we can give advice about what kind of recommendations you should get. And then we do interview training as well. So those are some of the key areas. So more specifically, the list of our future planning services. So we have private middle school and high school applications, especially students from grades 5 through 8, but realistically we can do any K-12 students who want to go to a private school. We can help with those applications. For students primarily in grades 8 through 11, we do academic and extracurricular enhancement. We have college application and essay services for students applying for undergrad freshman, transfer, as well as grad school. So even like MBA, master's programs, any of those. And we also have one-on-one essay editing and interview training packages. Okay, so just a little bit about our services for younger students. So when they're not in their application year, what are we trying to do? Well, essentially, we're trying to help students build a personalized, competitive application profile. So how do we do this? Well, these are some of the core aspects of the service. So we have 10 meetings a year, major and career assessment, academic evaluation. We help students select their courses at school, give advice on test prep, help with extracurricular activity, research, and planning. Same with summer programs, planning all of that. We help students prepare for or prepare their resumes for college, do college list research, college tour planning, and other personalized services. Then for students in their application year, so the very primary objective here is to help package and present students in the best light possible to colleges. Okay, so when we're doing applications, here are our big specialties. So coming up with like a really good application strategy, okay? What kind of person are you? How do we want to show you and package you to colleges? Extracurricular activity enhancements. We have a lot of programs and have a lot of databases for giving you the best advice possible. Essay editing, okay, so helping you craft those awesome essays. And also crafting an ideal school list and having a good strategy for that. So here are some more specifics about those application services. Okay, so different packages, 10 schools, 8 schools, 5 schools, depending on how many schools you want to apply to. We have meetings as necessary with your coach or consultant, so we're very flexible, whatever you need. The application profile strategy, we help you choose your major and develop your college list. We help with the whole essay editing process, from brainstorming to helping you create outlines to telling you how to write. Then early application strategy, kind of like what I talked about today, but more personalized and more in-depth. Application interview prep, we can help plan college tours, deferral and waitlist strategies if you're in that situation. And we can also help you choose which college you go to after you get a bunch of offers in April, and any other pre-college and personalized services. Then we also have some one-on-one essay editing and interview training and video supplement support packages for people who like those hourly ones. So, we still go through the same process for essay editing. We also can do writing training if students need to do proctored writing. So that's especially for students doing those private K-12 applications, interview training and prep and mock sessions. And video supplements are getting more popular these days. So we can also help provide support for that area as well. So when we do hourly packages, we make very organized plans like this. So then when we're having meetings, when we're doing outside, like offline editing, and all of that stuff, and just keeping everything really clear so we can stay on track. Then we also have some boot camps. So these are group sessions. We have the college essay boot camp starting this Monday, actually. So we cover many different things here, from the UCs to the activity list, also talking about that main personal statement. Then we also have the college prep bootcamp starting tomorrow. So basically everything you need to know about college applications besides writing those essays. So, talking about creating your college list and application systems, choosing a major, all of that stuff to get you set up to submit great applications. Okay. Oops, seems like there's something. Oh, okay. One moment, let me reshare my screen. So basically, we're now to the Q&A part. So thank you guys for listening to me. I'm sure you want to hear some other voices now. So maybe Luckman can take it away.
Yes, thank you, Calla. Calla is actually so well versed in college admissions that her name is the root word for college, Calla College. And yeah, I took the liberty of also providing some links to everything she had been mentioning towards the end, links to the future planning, to the essay bootcamp, application preparation bootcamp. And then we truly want to know what you guys think. So I also, included a survey completely anonymous at the end so we can connect. Our goal is always to just always like headed to the moon. We're always trying to improve. So some links for all of you to check out. And so, yeah, I've got a few questions here. We've got, should you be looking at the average SAT score for a school on the 75th percentile?
Yeah, so when you look at those numbers, there's usually going to be a range for each school, that middle 50. So it's going to be from the 25th percentile to 75th. You always should shoot for the 75th or above. So that's always going to be your goal.
Thank you for that. Another very interesting question. If you indicate on the common application that you have a sibling who is applying the same year, will they look at your applications together?
Usually, yes. On many applications, you will be asked, do you have a sibling who's also applying? So that's a consideration at many schools.
Thank you, Calla. Another question. Can a student apply for many EA, early action schools, one REA, restricted early access, and one ED, i.e. early decision school? So can a student apply for many EA schools, one REA, and one ED school?
You can't really combine REA and ED like that. So the whole purpose of REA is that you're not applying to other schools early. That's why it's called restricted. Otherwise, it would just be the same as early action. So you kind of need to choose. Like, are you going to go like the restricted early action route, or are you going to do the ED route?
Thank you. Is it impossible to apply for financial aid for early decision school? Again, is it impossible to apply for financial aid for early decision schools?
Sure. I mean, it's not impossible. You definitely can apply for that. The reason I mention that is just because you probably won't know your financial aid package by the time you're accepted. So you need to basically like accept that offer, and well, you have to go there before you know your financial aid package. So if cost is going to be an issue and you're applying to like a really, really expensive school, it is slightly risky in terms of cost. I mean, there are always like loans you can do, but just something to keep in mind if you're in that kind of situation.
Okay. Our next question, so financial aid is always possible. Should I apply EA for my dream school or wait for regular decision and get a better grade in math this year?
Yeah, so for students who have relatively low GPAs, it might be worth it to just focus on that ED2 and regular decision round. Because if you wait a bit and you're applying in January, usually you're going to have your first semester senior year grades ready to send to colleges. So eventually colleges will see all of your grades, but it's more like that first impression. So if you're applying early, they'll just see your grades from grades 9, 10, and 11 of high school. But if you apply in that regular round, then they'll also see that first semester of grade 12. So if you want to have that GPA boost and give a better first impression to colleges, you might want to wait.
Thank you again for that, Calla. Our next question, why do colleges ask how you heard about their school? What will they do with the contacts you provide?
I think honestly, that's usually more just to guide their marketing. So it's really not going to affect your application. They just want to get some data for marketing purposes so that they can market in the best way possible.
If you have another question regarding siblings, if you have a very direct one, if you have a sibling who's also applying during the same year, will you be competing against each other?
Usually no. Yeah, usually they consider that because it's kind of like they'll accept both or probably not either one. But that's not always the case. It's just a lot of schools do keep that in mind. They don't want siblings to compete and hate each other if one gets in and one doesn't.
Got it. And so we've got some more live questions here. What is Naviance and does it work for international students?
So Naviance is a portal, and normally your high school will provide that. I do believe some schools abroad use Naviance, although it's not very common. Basically, your high school would provide this portal, and it's kind of like an LMS, but for college planning. So your counselor at your high school would set that up, and then you could access that, and then you could look at different schools and communicate with your high school about like the colleges you want to apply to and see like a bunch of college information. And you can also see statistics, admissions results from your high school from previously.
Okay. Also, same user asked, very quick one. Is it a good idea to submit my 1500 SAT to Stanford?
I mean, 1500, the percentile of that score is pretty high, but of course, if you look at the averages for schools like Stanford, the higher the better. I would definitely shoot for 1550 if I were applying to Stanford.
And you would know, as you did attend there on a full scholarship. So there you have it.
Oh, that was for grad school. I did not go there for undergrad.
You're a completely different ball game. When transferring from Canadian schools, will that create a lower chance of acceptance to U.S. schools? So essentially with an international transfer, is that going to lower any of your chances of admission from Canada?
I guess I haven't seen too many official statistics specifically on this topic. I would say normally schools would be pretty favorable to students coming from Canada. However, the majority of students will transfer within the U.S. between U.S. colleges. So it's relatively uncommon, but I don't think it'll hurt your chances just because you're applying from Canada. It's definitely possible.
Does REA really boost your chance of getting accepted, considering the fact that most of those applying for REA are likely very strong candidates?
Yeah. So, I mean, we saw from the statistics for ED before, and the REA is going to be pretty similar. So in the majority of cases, yes, it'll boost your chance. But actually, I've seen data from like quite a few years, even before they had like REA and things like that. So it used to be an even bigger benefit, but in recent years, the benefit is becoming smaller at quite a few schools just because there are these really excellent students applying. So generally speaking, it still will help, but it is tough because there are usually like the cream of the crop are applying the early round. So
thank you so much. That sheds a lot of light. And the last of our live questions, Calla, if you plan to take an online course the second semester, a year after you submit your application, do you need to let the college know of this plan when you first apply, or will they ask you for you to update your courses later on?
Okay, wait, sorry, can you say that one again?
Yeah, it was a bit of a tongue twister. Look,
okay.
If you plan to take an online course the second semester of the year after you submit your application, do you need to inform colleges of this then, or will they just ask you for you to update your courses later on?
Oh, I see. So the second semester grades from grade 12. Okay. Yeah. So colleges will kind of prompt you to send that like after you've been accepted. So then they'll say, we need your final high school transcript with all of your grades. That'll be sent around June or July, usually.
I think the question was meant to imply they plan in actually their second year of college after the application to take a semester online and are wondering if they need to inform the school up front about that on their application.
If they were doing online school, um, yeah, I mean, I guess if students were somehow doing online school through their high school and it's on their transcript, it should be there. Basically, you need to show 4 years of high school on your high school transcript. So if you somehow like transferred to a different high school, did an online school, whatever, it needs to be on your transcript. And if your current high school won't recognize it, then you'll need to send multiple transcripts to the colleges.
That actually does it for a lot of questions. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Calla. Keep in mind with the specificity of the questions being asked that, if you contact us, some of the links that I provided, we can go a lot more in depth and you can, there's a lot more knowledge to garner from Calla and other of our top level consultants to help your student reach their full potential. And, got to what we can in just a short amount of time, but again, we can go above and beyond to do so.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. So have a wonderful Saturday night.